I think he's okay. I think he is not useful, but but on a different note, I think he's funny just because of how outlandish and ridiculous his statements are.
So then,
I find him amusing at best, but not actually a useful or good president.
well, we appreciate your perspective on that. I personally am not here to pass judgment one way or another, but I will let the facts speak for themselves. So, the Democratic Party caused the virus to depose Trump. Obviously, there are some clear issues there, logically speaking, because at the end of the day, we know, or at least from what we know, the virus clearly originated in Wuhan province because the Chinese government was the first to lock down, the first to do all kinds of controls. Yes, they weren't transparent about it. However, there was clearly a lot of effort they put into containing the situation just for themselves. So if the Democratic Party is somehow creatively and cleverly, setting up a Wuhan virus lab or planting a virus and then somehow letting it get out into the wild and then somehow correlating that with the Wuhan virus lab or the wet market over there, then yeah, I guess that's a theory. It merits very little consideration because, quite honestly, based on the facts that we have, it just seems really outlandish.
It's just extremely illogical again.
It
It
just
makes no sense.
it just takes a lot
The
of
data
hops,
point.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, so Lauren, you missed this a second ago, but we were talking about the 5G network as being the cause for the crisis, right? For the Rona,
Or Rona.
for Rona.
Okay.
And this guy, I feel like there should be some kind of commentary on him. So actually, what he tried to use historical precedent as a way to explain the situation. So what he did was he said that in 1918, the Spanish flu, or 1914, whatever the year was, right? He said the Spanish flu was precipitated by massive changes in electromagnetic radio waves. So in other words, you're saying that because people made advances in radio technology, that there was a new pandemic. There's clearly an issue here, and I can tell you, let's keep using a historical precedent. Let's go to the Black Death. So many radios everywhere. They didn't even have electricity invented at that time. So clearly, this theory that major pandemics are preceded by major technological leaps in the electromagnetic field. That is his theory.
I see.
But yeah, he was the one that really kind of made it big. Like this one video right here caused enough people to push the theory out there. And actually, in the UK, Charlie Dog probably saw this. There was 5G towers in the north getting burned down.
That's really dumb.
Yeah, exactly. These cell sites are extremely expensive. So in a past life, I actually worked at a telecom company, and I was working on the 5G. I guess this makes me part of the conspiracy. I worked on the 5G project. Does that mean that I'm actually out here trying to actively disprove it?
So can you clarify what his logic
Yeah. Okay.
behind
The lo-
5G and coronavirus
the
3 and what
logic
is this number?
the logic is
Like,
this: the world is surrounded by electromagnetic waves, right? Because radio,
yes.
electricity,
Yeah.
magnetism.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So his theory is that because we are constantly using new technology to change the electromagnetic waves around the planet, that these electromagnetic waves are causing decay within the cells of the body. And these decays within the cells of bodies of not just myself, but of others, or like living creatures, causes viruses to be created. That's his theory. That's not how viruses work.
Well, what is what is his hypothesis? What is the actual creation process?
No, that's
What
it.
changes
That's it. He's
it?
saying random factors in the world are causing these virus mutations. That's what he's saying. That's his theory.
I don't know. That's another incredibly illogical and
No one's
honestly
saying
stupid.
conspiracy theories are the most logical things on the planet, okay?
Okay, but here's the problem. I mean, like, it's a fact that there are electromagnetic waves and fields and etc., and they do affect the body. Clearly, as we've used them too well for the better of medicine
I have a
and
chart
actually
for
science in
this.
general. including X-rays, etc. Gamma rays, we use gamma rays. By the way, did you know that using gamma rays in order to sterilize vegetation and produce is actually quite common, and it's actually fairly
Mm.
safe too. And
So
although it's a more you thing,
are you now
but my
triggering a new theory of why this is not an acceptable thing?
no, I'm just saying that
You're
as a science.
irradiating vegetables. Clearly, this is an issue.
No, I mean I guess in the literal sense you're irradiating them, but no, it doesn't function like that.
Yeah, and to be clear on this and why it doesn't
Also, but
function,
my
I want to comment on this real quick. Before you
okay.
continue. So, there's a difference between non-iodized radiation and ionized radiation, okay? And so ionized radiation is the stuff that you typically see in X-ray machines, in some of the security equipment that you see at the airport. Non-ionized radiation is the stuff that comes from waves in cell towers, what you see in regular ham radios, what you see in your regular car radio. Those are regular non-ionized radiation. And what they've said is, and they've done lots of studies on this, non-ionized radiation has no effect on cell health within the body, right? Now, clearly radiation does, right? They use chemotherapy and radiation treatment for those that have cancer. So very clearly, like radiation is a problem, right? But non-ionized radiation is what typically goes on from cell sites, all these different things, and has been deemed to be like inconclusively. There is no way that they are correlated between that and cancer. Okay, so that's a finite statement. That is a truth. There is no correlation there. So I just want to be very clear. Okay. All right, Malern, you were going to say something, bud.
Well, to add on to that, even ionized radiation, depending on how you use it, is fine. I mean, like again, gamma rays and X rays are ionized, but we still use them just fine. Granted, when you go to the doctor's office, they give you a lead plate to
Exactly.
help with the X rays. But for gamma rays, they're just killing immediate cells that are prone to that wave, so it's fine.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Right. So let's
But
move.
anyway, what was I saying?
Let's move on. Let's move on. So we've covered 5G and
All
the.
right, I was saying what didn't make sense to me is that I didn't understand what he was saying about actual creation. Like obviously, electromagnetic fields do affect the body, but
Hey man,
and it's
looky here. Let's
probable
just put it like
that
this. Let's just put it like this. I cannot explain his theory. And Charlie Dog, that's very kind of you. Thanks, but I'm sure you're very intelligent as well. Because honestly, it's a conversation, right? We're just discussing important things and we're trying to break down different issues, right? And I think everybody has the ability to do that. So I can't explain what the theory is behind the conspiracy, behind his thought process, right? But what
I don't know.
I
I'm just trying to think of it from an actual like distinct
don't think
cellular
about it from a science
actual
standpoint. Don't think
scientific
about it
theory.
from a science standpoint. Science is not being used here. This is very
Yeah,
obvious.
it's the same issue with all of these things. It's they're taking kernels of truth and
Mm,
expanding them to be inclusive of things that are totally, utterly unrelated, or
mm.
even if they're not unrelated,
So let's
it's
dig into
extremely
that. Let's dig into that. Let's dig into that. Right. A lot of these what you're essentially saying is that conspiracy theories have something that could potentially be very true, and people are
yeah.
extrapolating it and taking it to be the end times.
Right.
Okay. I didn't get a chance to show you this earlier. I think Mlaren, you would really find this quite hilarious. You take a read of the screen here,
I
and
can't see your faces in the way. Scroll down.
there are most certainly some Khazarian Luciferians, but there are two races over them: the real masters of the world, the pre-Adamites, or the elongated skulls, and over them the Draco reptilians.
I have no idea what any of those mean, other than that it's based on religion and
No, no, no,
rumor
no. That's our reptile
mythology.
overlords. Those are the reptile overlords. Okay, we're done
Well,
here.
I
No, no,
don't
we're
think
done
they
here.
need to
We're
go
done here.
over.
I'm gonna
I'm
end on the
assuming it's
reptile
again.
overlords. You've been muted now.
You're a bum.
No, you've been unmuted. Okay.
You're a bum.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, bud. Okay, so let's look into other organizations around conspiracy theories because I think there's something interesting about the organizations that propagate these pieces of information, right? It's understanding what do these organizations have to gain from things that could potentially be true or false, right? So you see a lot of this in some of the hype media nowadays. In the UK, I see some posts that get put out, and actually, you know what? Let's just show you them. I see news articles that get put out that I'm often like, is this necessary hype? Like, do we really need this? And I'm gonna scroll down low so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. And I'm pretty confident I can see it like every single time I come on here. So just scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Oh wow, this is weird. I'm not seeing what. Maybe they've realized that I'm really sick of these articles. Oh no, there it is. There it is. All right, right here, the Daily Mail. Now, don't get me wrong. I know that the Daily Mail is not like some rigorous quality news source, but right here, more than a third of furloughed staff have been asked to work by bosses during lockdown. Right.
Yes, it's just sensationalism.
Right. Sensationalism.
Bullshit
Exactly, and
clickbait.
it's
It's bullshit
so
clickbait.
it's frustrating. It's very frustrating, and you see this in society where we're pushing out news media that focuses on things like, about sensationalism, about hyping things up, about taking issues that may actually not be that serious to being serious things, right? I mean, yeah, it'd be kind of lame because furloughed employees technically are not required to work because they've been furloughed. So this is technically an inappropriate thing, and so it's, I guess, a shocking little S quote. Yeah, exactly. I sigh vigorously every time I read that. The Independent and the Sun. It's all wonderful news. But let's not criticize those guys. Let's focus on other people that are doing amazing things out there. So, Le Canadien. Where did he go? Where did he go? I was just there. Okay. So we'll come to this one because that's important as well. What happened? I just had Le Canadien. It was really good.
You have so many tabs.
Well, this is what happens when you have to research like these, obscure theories that come up, and you have to go to like different websites that I mean, heck, I don't know where I'm going to find these things. Okay, so Le Canadien. So at the end of the day, why are these organizations out here, right? You actually have things up here that literally say sexy pages at the top. So clearly, this is a premium establishment of news.
Okay.
But these are places where actually lots of people are getting their articles, right? I mean, like, even if it's just 55 people every single day, these people are pushing out information that could be detrimental or maybe not, right? This is the argument behind free speech and allowing people to have news that doesn't make any sense, right? So here, Robert F. Kennedy warns that Anthony Fauci is a fraud and has poisoned an entire generation of Americans. Okay, so real quick, Anthony Fauci, before he was doing this, was leading a charge on trying to solve the HIV crisis. So he was under Ronald Reagan at the time, and he was leading lots of research and testing and, not vaccination, excuse me, what's it called? Antibody treatment so that he could get something out there to try to save lives, right? And so Robert F. Kennedy is a strong anti-vaxxer. And so, you're getting this news out here. I guess we can argue that it's a different perspective, but I guess society's debate right now really just revolves around what do we allow to be, or to be free speech versus what we say this is just noise. And the difference between now and 50 years ago is I'm quite confident 50 years ago we had people out there spouting off their nonsense, right? Whether or not it's true or false. The thing is, we couldn't, use an algorithm to shove it into everyone else's face. That's a very different story. So, Lauren, how do you feel about that? Like, what's your view on free speech versus censorship, and how does that play into the conspiracy theory land?
I think that free speech is a good thing, but at the same time, the problem, I think it goes back into a lack of education and just these sites preying on basic human fears and lack of knowledge.
So let's take that, right. So let's think about how some of societies that are more authoritarian, right, are managing some of this, right. So China is has the Great Firewall. They limit how many people can actually
Right.
see X, Y,
Like
and Z.
they're kind of on the other extreme.
Yeah, they are on the other extreme, right? But that doesn't stop fake news from happening there, right? Because they will
Right.
come up with the most creative ways to sneak out illicit content, drugs, porn, disinformation, real information. They're finding all kinds of ways to kind of subvert the system, if you will. And that doesn't stop fake news from coming out over there. So I guess in a world where you have both extremes, where you say you can have the Chinese system or you can have the free speech system, moderated, extremely moderated free speech or a chaos war zone, what would you prefer? And Charlie Dog, I'd actually like to hear what you think as well, because this is a huge issue for a lot of people everywhere. Moderated speech, which is essentially the future of like what is China now, where they have bots trolling your social media channels nonstop, determining if it's correct, not correct, etc. Or would you prefer a chaos free for all like what we have now ish? That's generous, but
So to confirm, you're talking about if you could only have either extreme, nothing in between, which would you rather have? That's what your
uh huh. Yeah, and
question.
ironic because I prefer the moderate position, but yes, I would love to hear if you pander to an extreme.
I mean, I'm consider myself moderate,
Mm-hmm.
but if you're asking me if I only have the option of those two extremes, then I would say the free speech one.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And I mean, I think that's a sentiment you hear probably a lot more at the end of the day because we all, as humans, we have a desire to express ourselves. So.
It's not only that, but it's yes, there's a lot of trash out there, but sometimes there's good stuff that comes out or important stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So if at least if you have free speech, vital information can get out.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you have too much moderation, you, especially by the government, then you have, well, government agendas to where they can, government propaganda and agendas.
I like that statement. I guess we could trust other people to shut the idiots up. That's
I
the
would
hope.
I would rather have some gems out there that we have to dig through trash to find
Mm.
rather than not have those gems be around at all.
Ironically, I think this actually plays to another facet of society that we probably don't experience as much in the West because sometimes you see things that kind of like what we would consider a natural decision like this, where we say, free speech is the way to go. There are people out there. So, like, one of the things that people have done is they've asked, like, the Uyghur Chinese people about the Uyghur population. And so, for those who don't know about the Uyghur population, the Uyghur population is a Chinese Muslim minority in Western China. And what's been going on is they've been put into these boarding camps where they are, well, honestly, they're prisons, but they are boarding camps where they're re-educated and prepared for skills in a modern future China. That's the idea, right? That's what the Chinese government says. Now, then people here in the UK have asked Chinese people who are studying abroad and traveling and said, how do you feel about the Uyghur population being put in there? And they're like, oh, yeah, no, that's good. They should be re-educated. Yeah, they're basically being put in concentration camps. Exactly, right? There was a BBC article about it, a video. Pretty good. And there's also another good one on Vox, if you get a chance to look on there. I'll find it and put that up there. But in that situation, you have people that come from China. They're like, yeah, they should be re-educated and they should be structured. And so this is like that's not the intuitive answer. Like you would like for us at least, I think. I mean, Lauren, would you say that's your intuitive answer? Like you would say, oh yeah, no, yeah, they should be re-educated.
I wouldn't say that, no.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I mean, like, you're in a situation where you got a whole society that's like, or a lot of society where they're like, yeah, that's a good idea, and you're like, ooh, oh shoot, that's kind of a, that's a different problem, right? Because now you have people that are on the opposite end of the spectrum embracing moderation, embracing censorship actively. It's scary. It's a different world, man. It's a different world.
I think the biggest issue with the way it's being handled, though, at least for me, is that it's less education and assimilation into society, but it's at the level of actual indoctrination. It'd be different if they said, okay, if you want to join normal society, we'll give you these, and these social benefits, and we will pay for your education, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
It's different when you're literally forced into a specific area
Mm-hmm.
with only your group of people and you are being educated in exactly the way the government wants you to be. At that point, it seems there's no choice for them.
No, yeah. There's
It
definitely no
becomes
choice.
indoctrination instead of an opportunity at education or
Oh yeah, I mean,
assimilating to
they're
society.
they're doing things where you're literally like sleeping at night, and then it's a scary world where things are just happening, and then you just get a crazy little thing happening at night where people are just busting into your home and saying, hey, you need to go into the camp. They do this. They take kids
Yeah.
away from their families. It's scary, right? Like, to me, I'd be horrified if I heard that there were people doing things about that. And yet this is not in the news, right? This is not something that's covered right now. It's kind of sad. So let's see. Things Barry wants the Muslims gone. Barry the Butcher can't do anything. But if Prime Minister Barry wants the Muslims gone, he can convert the population to do the same. Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's a weird little situation, because with power, obviously, they're leveraging the complete might of the Chinese bureaucracy, which is honestly quite.
Propaganda.
Yeah, propaganda is a real thing. Watch that Vox. Yeah, I'm gonna find that Vox video. I mean, the Vox video behind this is really, really good,
The,
honestly.
the other thing that gives conspiracy theories to leverage is that it's a fact that there are many, many corrupt people and that governments have done throughout historically have done really terrible experimentations, indoctrination, propaganda, etc. on the populace. That's an actual fact. But when you take it to the extreme, that's when it becomes an issue.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like, there are definitely aspects of forms of indoctrination, public opinion sway in almost everything, right? You're gonna see that regardless of administration, there's always gonna be some form of bias, right? And bias is necessary. It's cyclical. It happens throughout time, right? It's it's part of how I think our societies evolve, right? If you look at World War II, the individuals that were in World War II are significantly more, I would say, probably like a more conservative generation, if you will. But at the same time, you see a general movement towards being a much more progressive and liberal society in the U.S. And you see that in Europe too, right? They've taken their trend, and you see them operating in different wavelengths, right? You see Europe becoming much more progressive, and right now we're kind of on the return swing with a little bit more populism and conservatism really rising there, here, South America. It's happening everywhere.
I I think it's becoming overall more I guess open or liberal, I guess, rather than conservative though, because of globalization and all the social media and social problems over the, I don't know, last 1 or 2 decades. And with globalization and the social media and the advancements of the internet and people being more connected in the literal sense of having information and data publicly out there than ever before, is leading to a kind of social influence and bias, and I guess
Yeah, I think this
that's
is
ongoing.
I think this
I think it
this is a
builds
good
into
point. It's a
all
good
of
point. This is part of the reason why I've structured some of the topics this week on this in this vein, because on Sunday I'm going to cover AI technology and its impact on the rest of the world. So that'll include stuff like, how does that affect us as people who are working every single day? How does that affect our politics? How does that affect just the way we live our day to day, lifestyle? What are we doing on a regular basis? Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I just read like 2, 3 books on it. That was really great books, and I'll share more about that on Sunday. So I think this is all part of a grander trend, like you're saying, learn about how we're seeing the world kind of shifting in terms of some of the issues that we're facing, right? I think that means that it kind of shifts the paradigm of what we consider liberal and conservative to be. Because at a certain point, the ideas that we had now would be considered far, far left compared to 1776, right? There's
Yeah,
there,
of
there's
course.
no way that they were at the same point in terms of some of the issues that we do now, such as recognizing LGBTQ rights, such as slavery, even. These are all very pressing issues that recently have had big, I guess, victories in society with the LGBT ruling in the Supreme Court. And then obviously the Black Lives Matters are, gaining momentum in a lot of state and local places as well. And possibly federal. We'll see how that plays out. Actually, Malern, what's it been like where you are in any of the community? Have you seen any changes? Have you seen any kind of news that might indicate that there's a groundswell or change coming in your spot?
Over in my spot, not really. It's actually been fairly good.
Mm.
If are you talking in regards to the protests, or are
Well, I mean,
you talking about?
I think it's a mixture of minority communities where we all live. Actually, I mean, there's always like
I think
pockets of things, right?
minority communities are interesting in that, especially in the US, is called the Great Melting Pot
Mm.
historically. So
Yeah.
even though the US has a very diverse population, you have some very ethnocentric centers, and there's a lot you could question, do those ethnocentric centers occur and pop up because naturally
Near friends and
people tend
family.
to be near friends and family and people similar to them, or is it also because of social issues, a lack of trouble integrating racism, etc., etc.?
Mm. It's you know
I mean,
I
obviously
understand what you're saying, right?
there's multiple factors. Everything in the world is ultimately multifaceted. There will
Yes,
always be
yes,
multiple
good, good. This is exactly
variables.
what I'm trying to drive at with
There
the
will
theme
always
of.
be multiple variables. The question is, I guess, what plays the largest influence.
I actually want to
Terms of
address. I want to
in
address the one thing
terms
I
of
saw
where
at
I
Charlie.
am, there are
Oh, I'm
very
gonna mute
much
you. I'm gonna mute
ethnocentric.
you.
End yourself.
So, one of the things that I just saw that Charlie posted, I think, is quite important to mention because he said that his country is trending on Twitter for racism, right? I think it is a tricky balance for any place to manage this topic, right? When you look at all the other countries that are out there, they're all going through their own racism discussions. And it's like Lauren was just saying, it is multifaceted. I was on a Canadian website earlier today. I follow some Canadian Twitter feeds to kind of understand what's going on just north of us boys. And oh, your county. Oh, my bad, dude. I thought you said country. I didn't even read that close. My bad, my bad, my bad. Yeah, I got you. Sorry to hear that. I'm gonna check that out though because now I'm curious. I love seeing good trending on Twitter. But in general, right? It's you always have these areas where people are multifaceted in race and their experience with race. So it's very hard for people to be homogenous in sorting out how we're going to manage these issues. There's so many things that make our perspectives on race unique that it's hard to make it the way that we all ideally want it to be. If you have someone who lives in a county, like this is actually a good example. If you have someone who lives in a county where the minority population is absolutely nil, how do you expect them to have an understanding of what an appropriate discourse on race to be if they've never had that discourse? If they've never been placed in a position where they would be uncomfortable, how can you expect them to know how to have that conversation, right? It's not intuitive. Like, I didn't just wake up one day and say, oh, yeah, then now I understand what it's like to be gay. I'm not gay, so I don't know. But I have friends who
I think that
live.
also goes
Mhm.
back to education, though, and educate
But can
both
you
institutional and
educate that?
educating yourselves.
Like, how do you institutionalize a discussion on race?
Well, you can institutionalize it by talking about exactly what we're talking about, social problems and race, problems of race
Mm,
throughout history, how it's been handled, etc.
mm,
No, you will never have the same problems as that group, but you can empathize or sympathize or come to some level of understanding. I mean, it's like anything else. It's like anytime, like if a friend has a problem, you may not be in someone's exact situation,
mm.
and you shouldn't lie to them or yourself in an attempt to make them feel good, as in like you shouldn't say, I know exactly what you're going through.
Yeah.
That's not true, but at the same time, it's also not true that you don't have any understanding at all.
Okay.
You get what
In
I'm
other words,
saying? Like, there's,
that you're trying to be engaged on a topic, and that you have the
yeah,
best intentions to understand, but you don't
right. And
necessarily
you have
know.
data points, but you will never live it. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
another example is okay. This is the only example I can think of because I tend to think of medicine.
Well,
But
I hope it's a good one then.
yeah, so I can be a male gynecologist, yeah?
Yeah.
I will never be a woman,
Well.
biologically born a woman, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between being biologically born a woman from birth, okay? Being
Ooh,
biological.
you're wandering into dangerous waters now, man.
Look,
Whoo!
it doesn't matter. There are only two biological sexes, okay?
Oh, dang!
It's an
Oh!
actual literal fact. I
I'm
don't
not
care what
arguing
you
on
say.
this topic right now. That's a whole topic stream, so we're gonna go. I understand what you're trying to
I'm not
drive
going.
at, but I don't want to engage on that
Anyway,
now
okay,
because
my
that's a
point.
heated topic.
Okay, let me stray away from that and say that. But
Yeah,
my
yeah,
point
go
is
for
that
it.
I can be a male gynecologist, and many women prefer male gynecologists. However, I will never be a okay. I may not be a woman, but that doesn't mean I can't come to understand their problems. That's my point.
Oh,
While you
you
may
mean their
not
physical
exactly
problems,
be,
not necessarily their experiential problems.
yeah, I mean, like even their experience, like you may not experience the
So
same things, you may not have been in the same thing.
you know of their situation, but you do not personally
Yes, I
understand it.
mean that isn't
Got
that
it.
how life works? I mean, you meet hundreds, thousands of people throughout your lifetime. Do you know exactly everything they're experiencing? No, but you have some level of understanding. I mean, if I
Fair
work
enough.
as
Fair
an
enough. That's good. That's good. I
engineer,
mean, I get what you're saying, right? It makes sense, and I think that's a reasonable statement that you can say that you can know, but not necessarily
have the
understand from an
exact same
emotional
experience.
standpoint, right? I get that. I get that, and
Yeah.
we'll move on from that topic because I think that's it can only get more complicated from that point. Let's kind of go on to this other part that I was about to hit on, and then we kind of really dug deep into that issue. I can't even remember where we started on it, but here we're talking about individuals that are propagating these pieces of information and what their objectives are. So here is a website called the Global Disinformation Index. It is a organization that is dedicated to understanding what is the source of funding, the source of this information that shows up, and what is the possible intent. So in other words, a whole nonprofit organization dedicated to figuring this out. And some of the reports that they put out there are around, let's get the research section, are about trying to understand who is profiting from this information. So here you have the coronavirus sites for the week of June. And what they do is they go into each of the sites that are putting out their possibly false information, and then they break out who has the advertising dollars on it. So you'll see Amazon, Audible, eBay, Blue Apron, Jack Daniels, and all these other big brands. O2 for the Brits. As you can see, and these tend to actually be on sites that are not necessarily British, ironically. This is the American Thinkers, so you see all these different advertisements, and this looks like it's ironically being served in Germany. Yeah, wayfair.de for Germany. So I'm not really sure who's reading this, but hey, whatever, right? So you're seeing these these advertisements pop up, and this is how these websites fund themselves, right? Because they have to find ways to monetize in order to keep putting up content. these reports go in and figure out which companies are doing this and supporting this kind of environment. Theoretically, the objective behind this is to defund websites that do not get monetization. Now, this might be fine and dandy in this situation. However, where it becomes a little scary is the Federalist. I don't personally know if this is a conspiracy website or not. Federalist.com, I believe. The Federalist, yeah. No, that's not it. This is it. Okay. So these guys are a conservative group that are very much, obviously, much more right-wing than the normal, I would say, moderate position. What recently happened was there was an individual who was on Twitter who flagged it to Google saying that these individuals are propagating misinformation, they're pushing out other fake news, essentially. And Google then decides, okay, hey, we're going to send a warning to these guys that if you are doing this, we are going to make you lose your monetization. It comes as a question here as to say, now a company like Google, which is a titan of industry and has millions and billions of dollars, has the ability to tell different news organizations that you have to stop X, Y, and Z. I do not know if this website has fake news or not, or if it's just, a bunch of BS. But at the same time, it does raise the specter of what happens to information that possibly does not suit a Google agenda. Does it get demonetized? It's kind of wondering who's watching the watcher, right? Google is the big watcher now. So who's watching them? Who's actually taking care to make sure that they have the best interests of the community at heart? Now, clearly, they have no obligation to the citizenry because they are not a government institution. They are, in fact, a private company. So their first obligation is to their shareholders. And their shareholders can be Chinese, Japanese, Saudi Arabian, Russian. All these individuals can come and have different interests and apply that interest pressure to the companies. So at the end of the day, when you have a company that has control over so much information and so much knowledge, is there a risk that these giant corporations have too much control over our day-to-day lives? This is a big question that has played out a little bit in the election currently in the United States, election 2020. One of the things that Joe Biden has advocated for is a investigation into potential antitrust behavior by tech companies. So, unfortunately, that is a very vague statement. It doesn't really advocate for anything. It just says investigate, and you can do an investigation for years. I mean, Brexit is going on for 4 or 5 years. So it doesn't stop just because someone does an investigation or a committee or a review. Unfortunately, you're going to be in a situation where we don't know if there's going to be action taken on these organizations that have immense control over the way you live your life. I mean, how many times a day are you going on Google? Actually, learn, do you go on Google?
Yes.
I don't know.
A lot of people are using DuckDuckGo these days, though.
Yeah, it is a very common... Oh, wow. Yeah, I've seen that. That is a good one. Yeah, it's too real. I saw that comic that came out. It was hilarious. I loved it. It was really, really good. But let's just hope that is not a reality, that Brexit gets negotiated on for another 20 years. Because unfortunately, it requires this consensus in order to address hot topic issues like Brexit. It requires consensus to address issues like the tech monopolies that are going on in the world. Because if we don't address them at some point, they will have more control than we ever really intended to give them. You know what they say? This is the Washington Post's tagline is democracy dies in darkness, excuse me. And I think that's applicable to the tech companies as well, because they have yeah, and things. They have too much control, because it almost goes anti-capitalist at that point, right? I mean, let's just take it from a free market kind of standpoint. If you believe in capitalism and perfect competition, having one company that has all the control over information, access to search data, advertising, and etc. They determine the fate of all other companies. This is inherently anti-capitalist, and capitalism tends to be the hallmark of a good free market competition believer on the conservative side. So this is why I bring up that this is an issue that should have consensus, quite honestly, but lobbying dollars tends to keep a tight grip on things, so that it's a scary place. The world is a scary place. Okay, back to this lady, Judy Muykovitz, disgraced doctor at the center of the pandemic. This will be my last article, I think, on the pandemic, because I think I want to hop over to the Midwest revitalization. The quick note on the Spark Notes version of this doctor. So once upon a time, she worked at a research facility, and she declared that X was caused by Y. It was based in no science and resulted in her getting fired from that group. She has then since turned into a conspiracy theory advocate and champion by saying that the coronavirus is another tool of the elites to control society. So this is the Plague of Corruption books that she recently launched. She's also part of the Plandemic conspiracy theory video that was launched on May 4th. Most of these there has been no basis for it, but just be aware of some of the things that are out there. Okay, let's move on to Midwest revitalization. Page switch. Okay. Malern, do you have any ideas, or do you know what this topic is about? Should I do a quick breakdown of what's going on here?
Just do a quick breakdown.
Okay. So, the Midwest and the north of the UK actually... Actually, I would like to make a quick comment on what I've just read by Charlie Dog. It says that, how does someone that smart become that dumb? I would like to argue that there are a lot of people that just get to certain places where they are perceived to be intelligent, mostly by a lot of dumb luck, connections, and the occasional